in less than an hour, you're going to have the school board in their special meeting. I know that this situation today will be a part of that conversation. And I wanted to take this opportunity, along with the leadership and the principals, to bring as much clarity as possible to this unfortunate situation that happened just before 11 o'clock this morning. So often the initial reports are just not correct. But as the day goes along, and we're 5.5 hours away from that, we now know a lot more than we did at 11 o'clock this morning. There are certain things that we know. There are some things that we suspect. We will only talk about what we know today. And as we go forward, we'll keep you informed so that you can inform the public. And I would ask people to listen to the real media as opposed to some of the social media, because as a general statement, there's some truth in these social media, but it sometimes gets embellished. This morning, we did have an active shooter situation at the high school. Very unfortunate. Within minutes, we were on the scene along with the school system. The individual that was wounded. Anytime you get shot, it's serious, but I'm pleased to tell you that that person was taken to the hospital and has now been released. I will also tell you that we've trained over the last several years on active shooter situations. As a matter of fact, just as school started, we had an active shooter drill with the school system, and General Sams is going to talk specifically about what we trained and what in fact did happen there. Part of that active shooter is positions that people go in rather than waiting for the posse to get there. Multiple agencies, as you know, responded, and we're very grateful for that response. We're very grateful for the cooperation between the police department as well as the Montgomery Public School System. Both did things that they were trained to do, and we'll try to explain some of the time frames that went on. I will tell you that we have detained an individual. I will tell you that we have confiscated a weapon, but I'll also tell you that we're continuing to interview a number of other individuals that witnessed this, and they may or may not have some involvement. One thing that I will say, and Scott Tatum will talk more about it, is we've had some questions about why it took us so long to do various and sundry things. Well, first of all, we were there in moments. First thing you do is you go in and you secure the area to the extent you can, and you protect lives that are there. And that was the primary mission once the situation got neutralized. From that standpoint, you had kids running in all directions, some of which had been in the gym, some of which now are going back to the classroom. It took us a while, as you can imagine, to get everybody back in that classroom, to count all the heads, to check every classroom, to make sure that there were no additional active shooters in the building and involved. And that timeline took several hours, which is customary and normal as you do very methodically and very thoroughly. I was on the scene for about 15 to 20 minutes, about an hour and a half afterwards, and there was not pandemonium, there was not chaos. The public school system had a procedure in place to check out those kids that the parents on the scene wanted to get checked out, and our people were taking an orderly inventory of all that was there. I would like to now call on Ron Sams to talk specifically about some of the training and some of the things that, if you were on the scenes, you saw in fact happen as they were trained. Gentlemen?
Every school situation is going to be different. But last fall, before school started, we had an active shooter exercise with over 300 of our MPS teachers and almost as many of our first responders, both in the city and outside the city, to determine and train. What would we do if a situation like this happened? Well, today, that training paid off because we know that even though every situation is different, there are some things that are going to be common things that we need to do. For example, we need to set up a cordon outside. We need to segregate the area. We need to make sure that there's an area for parents to be. We need to respond quickly. We need to use every asset that we can when we have a situation like this. And if you saw that out there, we had Aaliyah respond, we had, actually the FBI was there, we had a helicopter overhead, all because the number one thing for us is our kids' safety. We practiced what we trained last fall, and the initial response that you saw today was a result of what we trained. Now, in terms of what MPD did, I'd like to have Chief Tatum now explain step by step what actually took place.
Before that happened, let me just talk about the communication. I think that it was flawless in terms of the response time. So Chief Tatum is going to really talk about the steps that took place once the police got there, because it was kind of chaotic. But let me just say this: I think that when the initial officers got to the scene, I think they immediately went to the area of concern, found out some information where the victim was taken. So at that point in time, information got out. There was additional officer that was responding to the scene as well to forward information on possible individuals that might be of concern and question. So I think it's important that the first officer or two that gets to the scene, as Director Sands indicated, to set up some type of perimeter, I think is important. But most important on that is that communication, get it out, and transfer that information so the responding officers will know exactly where to go. When we have additional law enforcement agencies that will respond, we will have somebody to meet with them at our command post so we can direct them exactly what needs to be done. In terms of the in-depth investigation and steps that's taking place, Chief Tatum will kind of give you some information on what we did and how we coordinated with not only law enforcement officers, but with the MPS staff as well.
Well, as you all know, just before 11 o'clock this morning, we had an incident at Lee High School. The mayor, the director, and the chief have already alluded to a lot of the scenario that took place. But what I want to reiterate is the training that is attended by all police officers statewide, the alert training. Today was a prime example of how effective this training is. No longer are the days when you stand by and you wait for other officers to arrive before you go into an incident. Our officers went in immediately. We got the call, like I said, just before 11 o'clock. Within minutes, actually multiple calls went out. We actually have a school resource officer that's assigned there that received a telephone call from the staff along with other members of the staff, the MPS, that made the 911 call. So within just a matter of just a few seconds, actually, phone calls were being made and the word was getting out. Part of the alert training, as they alluded to prior, it goes out once your local law enforcement, and that includes county, state, Aaliyah, they start hearing an active shooter situation, we all respond, which happened today. Those of you that were out there on scene, you saw Aaliyah out there assisting us in the traffic direction. They held the outside perimeter for us and assisted us in that manner while we took care of the inside of the school. I want to give kudos to the MPS staff. As soon as the active shooter situation went into effect, they went into a full lockdown, and the students that were actually out in the hallways and transitioning throughout the school were pulled into anywhere they could pull them into to make sure they were safe. And therein lies part of the problem. Once they go into lockdown mode, it's in the active shooter situation is taken care of. For us, the clock stops. We take our time. It's very methodical how we go through this process. We do secondary searches to make sure we don't have a second shooter. So all that takes time, and that's what I want to reiterate to the parents. We were in the schools, we had your kids, we were making sure they were safe. MPS was making sure your kids were safe. And it's just a time-consuming process to go through a school, as you can imagine, a facility like that, going door to door, place to place, looking under everything to make sure that we don't have another situation that could possibly transpire. The active shooter situation took place in the gym. There was a little bit of issue there. We do have an individual in custody. There was a weapon that was recovered. We are still investigating. We so far have interviewed approximately 30 students and faculty from the school. So that is still in process as I speak. There's a lot of details that I can't tell you at this point because the investigation is continuing. But I can tell you that the active shooter drills, the practicing, the communication between MPD, the other law enforcement agencies in the area, and MPS worked today. And I also would like to thank Aaliyah and FBI, ATF, and all the other agencies that responded and assisted us with today.
Scott, let me just mention a couple of things that you alluded to. You know, we have a new tool called Starwatch. That Starwatch got up and running immediately. That has helped us not only to recreate the situation in the gymnasium, but it's also helped us identify and have opportunity to talk to other people. As we've talked to these 30 and others, some other information is beginning to come available, and so that'll help us as we try to move forward. I want to say exactly what Scott did. At the end of the day, we had your kids. The school system had your kids. They were locked down, they were safe, and they were secure. Now, who knows what else might have happened, but today we had an unfortunate situation that because of whatever reason, hopefully it was training, hopefully it was quick action, we were able to avert some of the other things. And as I have said, the MPS was part and parcel of everything that went on today in a positive manner, and I would like to call on Dr. Ann Roy Moore to talk about and to assure the parents as well that our public school system had their kids in that school.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to say or reiterate that the cooperation between law enforcement and the school system was top-notch. I want to also say that Dr. Parnes and his staff at Lee High School were on top of things. As soon as they heard about it, they immediately took action and started to do things that they had rehearsed and they knew about. Now, it was unfortunate, but I will say that because of everyone coming together, that it worked to the best way that we could make it work. Now, parents, I want to assure you, I know that it is nerve-wracking. I'm a parent and I know how that feels. It is nerve-wracking to think that your child is in some kind of danger until you can really get some really good information from the inside. I went there and I spent 3 or 4 hours along with all of the other law enforcement people and Dr. Parnes and his staff. I was inside. I felt very safe once I got in there. Of course, parents, I know parents want to come and check kids out and just run up in the school and start doing things because they want their children to be safe, and as a parent you feel like the best thing I can do is get my child home with me. That does not work in this kind of situation. It is not to make anybody unhappy or to keep you from getting to your child, but under the circumstances, the best thing to do is to allow law enforcement to do what it does in a very orderly, methodical manner, and that is what happened today. And once everything was cleared, then students were allowed to start leaving, some with their parents later on at dismissal time, and some on buses, some walkers. The interesting thing about this was that when the kids got outside, we kind of had to remind them that they needed to go on home. They were still standing around. But I feel very good about how this all worked today. It was an unfortunate situation, but everybody came to the table, did what they were supposed to do, And I think under the circumstances, it was handled in a very, very, very outstanding manner by all people involved.
I told you at the beginning that we would tell you everything we know. Based on everything we know right this moment, this was not a random act. It occurred within the confines. I know first report was somebody shot from outside and it came in. We have no evidence to indicate that whatsoever. And some of the evidence, as we have seen through that Star Watch program, says otherwise, but we're not definitively there yet. There is a lot of additional investigation that will be had tonight and tomorrow, and hopefully in the very near future we can give you chapter and verse along the way. I know that you want to know how the gun got into the school. I do not think we can answer that question today. Additional surveillance cameras have to be accessed to be able to do that. That's something that MPD and MPS need to work through together to assure ourselves that these weapons that we know that are on the streets don't come into our schools, hopefully don't come into any of our other areas along the way. I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions that you have that we can answer, just giving you a precautionary warning that most of what you're gonna ask, we're probably not gonna be able to answer, because to my knowledge, we've told you everything that we in fact know. Questions?
Can you tell us how many shots were fired?
Based on what we know now.
We can't, as of right now, we can't tell you. We know we have one individual that had one single gunshot weapon. That's all I can confirm at this point.
He's only confirming that because we don't know. But everything we know would indicate that that's it, but we are not prepared to say that.
Is the person who's been detained, are they a juvenile?
Yes.
Can you confirm if this affects any school security plans? Because clearly someone was able to permeate some vulnerabilities on campus today.
Yes, based on my observations and based on what I saw today, I am going to get with our head of security, and we're going to review all of our school safety plans to see where we need maybe to possibly shore those up.
Can we confirm if that juvenile, it was a student at the school?
I think based on everything we know today, at this hour, yes. But again, that has to be run to ground. The initial indication is yes.
At this point at Lehigh School, is there only one main entrance that people are supposed to, or one access point that people can come and go from, or are there multiple entrances and exits that are open and available to traffic?
The main entrance is the front where you have your metal detectors. Lehigh, however, is a very old school with multiple ways of getting in and out. And so even though you may deter students or others from coming into some of those other entrances, I won't say that it's not possible that sometimes that does happen.
And this was in fact at an outbuilding, not in the school proper.
Last year, the governor introduced her Smart on Safety initiative and also the Century program. How does that come into play now with something like this happening?
The Century program actually deputizes teachers and administrators to carry weapons. We are not a part of that program as of now, and it remains to be seen whether or not we will participate as a school system.
Mary, you said this was an outhouse type
Well,
facility?
it's a gymnasium, it's part of the school, but it wasn't in the major school itself. You can access it from outside and you can access it from the school scenario. I'm gonna be mayor another 10 months. I don't think that we can recommend that we arm teachers and administrators unless there's a specific circumstance that I can't think of right at this point in time. But at the end of the day, that's not our decision, but if they ask for my recommendation, that's what it would be.
Can anyone tell us how long it took to determine whether the shooter was still on campus after police arrived, when you were able to clear and secure the facility and know the shooter was no longer a threat?
Okay.
When the initial units got on scene, there was not active shooting going on. There was not what you would call an active shooter. It took a matter of minutes as soon as they got on scene. Like I said, as soon as the shooting went down, MPS locked the school down. So, you know, once again, I have to give them their props for going into action immediately. As soon as our units got on scene, they went straight to the location which was the gymnasium, to where the shooting occurred. At the time when they arrived, there was not active shots being fired. So at that point, it becomes a search mission. So, and that's what they started at that point, from the initial location.
And that's the reason that you have to do a very methodical and a very system check, because you don't know if there is in fact that. And so to the extent that you've got them in rooms where you can visit with them, you're making that determination of what's still there. So I would say at the end of the day, we probably had a valid reason to believe it was not there. You had a valid reason right after that, but at this juncture, until we look at lots of cameras that we haven't had a chance to see, we won't know for sure.
This juvenile that was detained, was he detained inside the school?
No.
How much longer do you anticipate it will take before you can formally charge someone for this?
That's hard to say. I mean, you know, we have to go through piece by piece, every piece of evidence that's out there, looking at multiple cameras, multiple frames. You know, we want to make sure we do our due diligence to make sure we charge the right individual. So I don't want to put a time frame on it specifically.
So will they be at Air Base Boulevard tonight, or will they be with you all at the
I can't tell you that. I wish I could, but I can't tell you that at this point.
They got taken to county
No.
with the detainee was taken.
He's in the
MPD?
investigations
Yeah.
right now,
Right.
being interviewed.
I don't want to overemphasize, but the fact that we have Star Watch allows us to do those investigations a lot more quickly, because we don't have to go to individual cameras and get those feeds. We can look into at the Star Center and be able to access those in real time or instantaneously be able to pull up that particular footage. So it may have taken us longer a while ago. I think it'll take us a shorter period of time, but until you get there, you're not gonna say you're there.
You kind of mentioned some, I guess you could call maybe co-conspirators at this point. How many other people do you anticipate you might could charge, and what would their potential roles be in this?
We don't know how many that we have involved at this point. Like I said, we are digging through every piece of video and evidence and interviewing like they did. They have already completed 30 interviews on students so far. And some of those, as you well know, will be, I didn't see anything to, you know, whatever. So it's a matter of putting the puzzle together now, take each piece and try to find out, place it where it goes. And that could take, you know, 15 minutes, that could take days. We just don't know. And we don't know how many individuals are actually involved.
But Scotty, I think it's safe to say we will leave no stone unturned, because we have got to make sure that we get everyone that was involved, if there are more than one, so that we can deter what happens in the future.
What will school look like at Lee tomorrow? Will you have additional security? Will it be more secure? Will all the schools around have a different, focus tomorrow?
Well, even during this time today, even though it was isolated at Lee, we did make all of our other schools aware of what was going on, because people have friends and relatives who are at other schools, and so we kind of kept them in the loop a little bit with enough information to know that everything was under control. Tomorrow, we will have additional counselors, social workers, security, and people like that on site, so that they can help with some of the issues that might pop up. I would say that the people in the school will have their eyes and ears open, because they will be hearing some things probably coming from students who are around, and they may say something that gives us additional information that we might be able to share with law enforcement, and that is definitely our intent to do. If we hear something that we need to share, we definitely will do that. So we're gonna have school. I know some kids will come in and they may be a little bit distraught, maybe a little bit anxious, and so we'll have those counselors on board so that they can help work with those children who might have the issues. have them available to do that. But we do intend to open tomorrow. That is what is pretty much normal for children to come back to where they were. And I think we'll probably have a pretty full complement of students at school on tomorrow.
Have you guys been able to determine what led up to the shooting? Was there a fight or an argument?
So that he doesn't have to answer you, I've asked that same question, what do we know? And we have some ideas, we have some suppositions, but those are just being formulated right now. I said earlier that it's not a random situation. It was a situation between some individuals, but what led to that until we actually talked to the victim, as well as we talked to or hear more from the individual that we've detained, we will not be able to speculate on that.
Sure.
Can you tell us what kind of gun you recovered?
No, I can't, just simply because I don't know right now.
But it's a handgun.
It's a handgun. It was a handgun.
Like a revolver?
Mayor, can I get y'all to step to the mic?
Yeah.
when you speak?
What he said was he doesn't know what kind of gun, it was a handgun.
This is the second juvenile that has brought a gun either on campus or inside the campus in the last 2 years. Are you potentially looking at wholesale changes to the way Lee is sort of secured, barring doors, monitoring students coming and going? I know it's a difficult task when you've got teenagers that change classes, but as far as looking at this long term.
Yes, I mean, I've been here since June, and I certainly do intend to do a full investigation myself of how we run our buildings as far as security is concerned. I will say this though, not to be smart aleck, but at school we don't pass out guns, we pass out pencils and paper. And so then we have to deal with what comes into the school, and we're gonna try to manage that situation at a higher level so that we don't have that potential for someone being injured the way we had today. The other thing, I wanna give some kudos to our nursing staff. We had some nurses there who were there to help take care of kids who might have been diabetic or whatever. So we tried to make sure that all of our students were covered. Once law enforcement did what it was supposed to do, then we came in behind them and did what we were supposed to do. And what we normally do is to get out of the way of law enforcement and let them do what they do, and then we assist them in any way possible. So, yes, I would certainly say we're going to go back and review all of our security plans, review what's going on with those doors, exit doors. You can get out, but you're not supposed to be able to get in necessarily because of fire codes. But we're gonna go back and work with the principal in the schools and security people to see what it is that we might do better in a school such as Lee, where you have so many ways to get in and out.
And let me just add, you train hypothetically a lot of situations, as the director said, every situation is different. But anytime we have an incident, we always do a postmortem on that. And so I think it's fair to say that the school system, working with law enforcement, will evaluate that school and all other schools if in fact there have to be any changes. That would be standard operating procedure for that. Again, hypothetically versus what actually happened. Once we know what actually happened, then we will be able to address that from a security standpoint. But at the end of the day, we'll work with the public school system to make sure our schools are as safe as they can be. I'll remind you that last year we had a situation at 2 schools where we, through the security procedures at those 2 schools, kept guns from getting in the schools. And so there is precedent in place and procedures in place to be able to address that. In this situation, it is unfortunate. I asked Superintendent the question. They all go through the metal detector when they go to school, but what happens after that is something that we really need to have to look and evaluate that. Well, thank you guys, I appreciate it. Sorry to bite in your time. You got 20 minutes to prepare for this. Let me just say that all of these school board members, I know that they were on pins and needles. I happened to be with Claire Wheel and the state superintendent when it happened this morning and got the word. Certainly they stayed in touch, but this is going to be a team. It's going to be a joint effort, just like everything else that we are involved in.